In the sprawling corporate state of Othelberg, a territory carved out of the vast deserts of the American West, Elias and his people, the community of the Covenant, lived under the oppressive thumb of the tyrannical CEO, Cyrus Vance Sr. They were the descendants of laborers brought in generations ago, now trapped in a cycle of servitude and debt peonage, their lives dictated by the whims of Vance Corp Industries. They endured unimaginable hardship and systematic cruelty. Elias, chosen by God to deliver the Covenant people, had repeatedly warned Vance to release his workforce, but the CEO's heart remained hardened, his pride unyielding. One day, God commanded Elias to return to Vance and display a miracle to convince him. Elias, carrying his simple wooden walking staff, met Vance before a gathered assembly in the central plaza of Vance Corp's headquarters. There, Elias demonstrated several miracles, including transforming his staff into a terrifying, writhing serpent of living wire and causing his hand to glow with an otherworldly light. But Vance and his council of technomancers dismissed these acts as sophisticated illusions and high-tech trickery. In their arrogance, they believed their own technology and power were absolute. This is the story of their struggle. To understand the full narrative, please read to the end and do not skip any part of this account. Let us begin. Cyrus Vance Sr., the man who built and ruled the corporate city-state of Ethelberg, was a ruthless and arrogant tycoon. He governed his domain with an iron fist, using corporate security, technological surveillance, and brutal suppression to enforce his will. His employees, the citizens of Ethelberg, lived in a state of constant fear and insecurity, their lives and property subject to his arbitrary decisions. The Covenant people, in particular, were treated as mere assets, cogs in his industrial machine, suffering the worst of his tyranny and cruelty. Vance had surrounded himself with a council of executives and scientists who reinforced his megalomania. They enjoyed immense wealth and luxury, living in penthouse suites atop the gleaming chrome towers of Ethelberg, completely detached from the suffering of the workers below. This opulent lifestyle only fueled their arrogance, making them believe that their power and influence were without limit. They saw themselves not just as leaders, but as creators of their own world, with Cyrus Vance Sr. as their self-proclaimed deity. In his public addresses, broadcast across the city's massive screens, Vance declared himself the sole architect of their prosperity, the ultimate authority to be obeyed and revered. He believed that every success was his own doing, and every failure was the fault of others. This belief solidified into a doctrine of corporate divinity, where loyalty to Vance Corp was the only faith, and Cyrus Vance was its god. The Covenant people, however, held on to their ancestral faith in the one true God. They found solace in their quiet prayers and the whispered stories of a promised deliverance, a hope that one day they would be freed from this modern-day slavery. It was foretold by the mystics within the community that a child born of the Covenant would one day rise up and dismantle Vance's empire. This prophecy reached the ears of Cyrus Vance, filling him with paranoia and rage. Fearing this threat to his absolute power, he issued a chilling directive. Every newborn male child among the Covenant people was to be decommissioned, a sterile, corporate term for murder. Squads of Vance Corp wardens swept through the workers' barracks, carrying out the horrific order. The community was plunged into an era of unspeakable grief and terror. Amidst this darkness, a Covenant woman gave birth to a beautiful baby boy. She hid him for 3 months, her heart aching with every cry, terrified that he would be discovered. As the warden's patrols intensified, she knew she could not hide him any longer. With a heavy heart, guided by a whisper of divine hope, she placed her infant son in a small, waterproof survival pod. She sealed it, and, under the cover of darkness, set it afloat in the main industrial canal that flowed through the heart of Ethelberg, the very waterway that powered Vance's industries. She prayed that God would protect her child, entrusting his fate to the current. She then sent her daughter, Miriam, to follow the pod from a distance and see where it would go. Miriam's heart pounded with anxiety as she watched the small pod drift downstream. To her astonishment, it was discovered not by a security patrol, but by a group of women near the private reservoirs of Vance Tower. It was Asia, Cyrus Vance's own wife, who spotted the pod. Curious, she had her attendants retrieve it. When she opened it and saw the helpless infant inside, her heart was moved with the compassion her husband had long since lost. She knew immediately he must be one of the Covenant children, spared from her husband's brutal decree. "I will keep him," she declared. "He will be my son. We will call him Elias, for I drew him out of the water." Miriam, who had been watching from afar, saw her opportunity. She approached Asia cautiously. "I know of a woman from the Covenant people," she said. "She is a good nursemaid and has recently lost a child. Perhaps she could nurse the baby for you?" Asia, wanting the best for the child, agreed. And so it was that Miriam rushed to bring her own mother, Elias's birth mother, to Vance Tower. As soon as the infant was placed in her arms, he began to nurse hungrily. In an extraordinary twist of fate, Elias's mother was hired, with a generous salary, to care for her own son within the very walls of the tyrant who had sought to destroy him. God had returned the child to his mother and ensured he would grow up under the protection of the enemy. Elias was raised in the lap of luxury, a prince in the corporate empire of Vance Corp. He received the finest education, was trained in the strategies of business and power, and dressed in the attire of the ruling class. He became known to all as Elias Vance, the adopted son of the great Cyrus Vance Sr. After he was weaned, his mother returned him to Asia's care, and Elias grew into a strong, intelligent young man. But despite his privileged upbringing, God bestowed upon him a deep wisdom and a powerful conscience. He never forgot his origins and felt a profound connection to the plight of the Covenant people. As he reached adulthood, he began to venture out from the sterile environment of Vance Tower into the industrial districts of Ethelberg. One day, while walking through a processing sector, he witnessed a Vance Corp warden mercilessly beating a Covenant worker. A righteous fury Elias had never known surged through him. He looked around. No one was watching. He intervened, striking the warden with a single, powerful blow. The warden collapsed, lifeless. Horrified by what he had done, Elias quickly dragged the body away and buried it in a pile of industrial slag, praying that his impulsive act would not be discovered. He returned to the tower shaken, consumed by guilt, and prayed to God for forgiveness. "My Lord," he whispered, "I have wronged my own soul. Forgive me." The next day, hoping to put the incident behind him, he went out again. He came upon two Covenant men fighting. When Elias moved to separate them, one of them sneered, "Are you going to kill me like you killed the warden yesterday?" Elias froze. His secret was out. Just then, a man came running from the direction of Vance Tower. He was a believer from within the corporate structure who secretly sympathized with the Covenant people. "Elias, you must flee," he panted. "The council knows what you did. Vance has signed your execution order. They are coming for you now." Panic set in. Elias knew he had to escape Ethelberg before the city's lockdown protocols were initiated. Praying to God for protection, "My Lord, save me from these tyrannical people," he fled the city alone, with no supplies save for his faith, and no companion save for the guiding hand of God. He left behind the only life he had ever known, venturing into the vast, unforgiving desert that lay beyond the corporate state's borders. He traveled for days, crossing the sun-scorched plains and navigating the rocky canyons. Finally, exhausted and dehydrated, he arrived at a small, self-sufficient desert settlement called Haven. He rested under the shade of a lone cottonwood tree near the community well, a stranger in a strange land, with no idea where he was going or what his future held. As he sat there, he saw two young women struggling to water their flock of sheep, being pushed aside by aggressive local herdsmen. Elias, seeing their distress, stood up. With his strength born of a life of physical training, he single-handedly drew water for their animals and drove the other men back. The two women, grateful and impressed, returned home and told their elderly father, Jedediah, about the powerful and kind stranger from the city. Jedediah, a wise and respected elder, sent one of his daughters back to invite Elias to their home for a meal. Elias, a lonely refugee, gratefully accepted the invitation. He followed the young woman to her father's house, where he was welcomed with warmth and hospitality. Over dinner, Elias recounted his entire story, his upbringing in Vance Tower, the crime he had committed, and his escape from Ethelberg. "Do not be afraid," Jedediah said calmly after hearing the tale. "You have escaped the land of the oppressors. Here in Haven, you are safe." Elias stayed with Jedediah and his family, finding peace and purpose in the simplicity of their life. He proved himself to be an honest, hard-working, and virtuous man. Jedediah grew to admire Elias's strength, character, and integrity. One day, one of his daughters approached him. "Father," she said, "this man is strong and trustworthy. Why don't you hire him? The best man to hire is one who is both strong and honest." Jedediah had been thinking the same thing. He made a proposal to Elias. "I wish to offer you one of my daughters in marriage, on the condition that you work for me for 8 years. If you choose to stay for 10, that is up to you. I will not be a harsh employer." Elias agreed to the terms. He married Sephora, Jedediah's daughter, and began his new life as a shepherd and a family man. The years passed peacefully, the flocks under his care thrived, and he became a beloved member of the community. After 10 years had passed, Elias felt a deep, persistent longing for his homeland and his people. He missed the Covenant community, even though his memories of Ethelberg were fraught with pain. He decided it was time to return. After receiving Jedediah's blessing, Elias gathered his wife and his belongings, and they began the long journey back toward the corporate state. He chose a less traveled route through the mountains to avoid Vance Corps patrols. One night, as they navigated a high mountain pass, they lost their way in the darkness. As Elias searched for the path, he saw a strange light in the distance, a fire burning on the slope of a great mountain, Mount Seraphim. "Wait here," he told his family. "I see a fire. Perhaps I can get some direction, or at least bring back an ember to warm us." He approached the light and found its source was a gnarled, ancient Joshua tree, engulfed in brilliant flames that did not consume its branches. As he stared in awe, a voice echoed from the fire, a voice that was powerful yet serene. "Elias." Elias trembled. "Here I am," he answered. "I am your God," the voice declared, "the God of your fathers. Take off your shoes, for you are standing on holy ground. I have seen the suffering of my people in Ethelberg. I have heard their cries, and I have come down to deliver them. I am sending you to Cyrus Vance to bring the Covenant people out of his grasp." Elias was filled with doubt. "Who am I," he stammered, "that I should go to Vance and lead my people out? They will not believe me. They will not listen to me." God asked, "What is that in your hand?" "It is my walking staff," Elias replied. "Throw it on the ground." Elias did so, and the staff instantly transformed into a terrifying serpent of shimmering, metallic wire, coiling and hissing. Elias recoiled in fear. "Pick it up," God commanded. "Do not be afraid." Hesitantly, Elias reached out and grasped it, and it immediately reverted to being his wooden staff. "This will be a sign for them," God said. "Now, put your hand inside your coat." Elias obeyed, and when he drew it out, it was glowing with a brilliant, pure white light, like it was made of pure energy. When he put it back and drew it out again, it was normal. "These 2 signs you will show them," God said. "And your brother, Aaron, is already on his way to meet you. He will be your spokesman, for he is eloquent. Go now, both of you, to Vance. Tell that tyrant to let my people go." Elias, his fear replaced by divine purpose, went to meet his brother. Together, they traveled to Ethelberg and went straight to the heart of the empire, Vance Tower. They stood before Cyrus Vance Sr. in his throne, like office on the top floor. "We are messengers from the Lord of all creation," Aaron announced boldly. "He commands you, let my people go, that they may worship me." Vance laughed, a sound cold and dismissive. "Who is this Lord that I should obey him? I do not know this Lord, and I will not let your people go. This is a pathetic attempt to disrupt my workforce. Get back to your labor." He then performed the ultimate act of cruelty, increasing the workers' quotas while cutting their resources, making their lives even more unbearable. "You see?" Vance taunted Elias. "Since you came, things have only gotten worse for your people." Later, in a public assembly, Elias once again confronted Vance. "I have come with clear proof from your lord," he declared. He threw down his staff, and it became the serpent of living wire. Vance, though momentarily startled, quickly regained his composure. He sneered, "Are you trying to impress us with your technological tricks, Elias? We have our own masters of technology." He summoned his chief scientists and engineers, his technomancers, who prided themselves on their ability to create stunning illusions with holograms, robotics, and advanced projection systems. He commanded them to replicate Elias's feat. The technomancers set up their equipment and, with a flourish, projected holographic images of serpents and threw down robotic cables that slithered across the floor. The crowd gasped, but then, Elias's serpent of wire surged forward and consumed them all, its divine reality overpowering their artificial illusions. The technomancers stared in shock. They were experts in the limits of science and technology, and they knew instantly that what they had just witnessed was not a trick. It was a power of a different order entirely. Falling to their knees, they proclaimed, "We believe in the Lord of Elias and Aaron." Vance was incandescent with rage. His own experts had betrayed him. "You dare believe in him before I give you permission?" he roared. "This was a conspiracy between you and him to take over my city. For this, I will have you all publicly and painfully executed, your bodies displayed on the corporate towers as a warning to all who would defy me." But the technomancers, their hearts now filled with true faith, were unmoved by his threats. "Decree whatever you will," they replied calmly. "You can only affect this worldly life. We prefer our Lord over any tricks you showed us. We pray that our Lord forgives us our past sins and grants us entry into a better place." Vance's heart grew even harder. His defiance against God now became absolute. This marked the beginning of a series of calamities that would strike the heart of Aethelberg. God sent plague after plague upon Vance and his loyalists, each one a systematic dismantling of the corporate infrastructure they worship. The city's water supply turned into a foul, toxic sludge. Swarms of malfunctioning security drones filled the air, harassing the populace. A pervasive technological dust caused painful skin afflictions. A crippling city-wide blackout plunged Aethelberg into an impenetrable darkness that no backup generator could pierce. With each disaster, a terrified Vance would summon Elias and promise to free the Covenant people if only the plague were lifted. But as soon as relief came, his arrogance would return, and he would break his promise. During this time, a faithful man from Vance's own inner circle, who had been hiding his belief, spoke out in the council. "Will you continue to persecute Elias and his people after all these clear signs? Remember the powerful empires of the past that were destroyed for their arrogance. This worldly power is temporary. True and everlasting life is with God. I fear for you a day of reckoning." For his dissent, Vance had him executed, cementing his tyranny. Finally, God brought forth the most devastating plague of all. A silent, invisible force swept through the opulent sectors of Aethelberg, and in the morning, the firstborn sons of Vance's elite, the heirs to the corporate empire, were dead, including Vance's own son. A howl of grief and terror rose from the city. This time, the blow was too personal, too profound. At last, broken, Vance summoned Elias in the middle of the night. "Get out!" he screamed. "You and all your people. Leave my city now, and take your flocks and herds with you." Under the leadership of Elias, the Covenant people gathered their families and possessions and began their exodus, walking out of the gates of Aethelberg as a free people. They marched towards the east, towards the promise of a new life. But once the initial shock and grief subsided, Vance's pride resurfaced as rage. How could he have let his entire workforce, the source of his power and wealth, simply walk away? "They have fled from us," he yelled to his commanders. "Assemble the elite security forces. Prepare the armored pursuit vehicles. We will drag them all back in chains." Vance himself led the chase, his powerful convoy thundering across the desert floor, quickly closing the distance. The Covenant people soon found themselves trapped. Before them lay the vast expanse of the Great Salt Lake, its waters wide and impassable. Behind them, the dust cloud of Vance's approaching army grew larger. Fear turned to panic. "Was it because there were no graves in Aethelberg that you brought us out here to die in the desert?" the people cried out to Elias. "We are trapped. It would have been better to remain slaves than to be slaughtered here." "Do not be afraid," Elias commanded, his voice ringing with absolute faith. "Stand firm and you will see the deliverance the Lord will bring you today. The Lord will fight for you. You need only to be still." Then God commanded Elias, "Lift up your staff and stretch out your hand over the water to divide it." Elias raised his staff over the Great Salt Lake. A mighty wind began to blow, and before the astonished eyes of the people, the waters parted, pulling back to form two towering, liquid walls. Between them, a wide path of dry ground appeared, stretching all the way to the opposite shore. Without hesitation, Elias led his people into the path between the walls of water. They hurried across, their fear replaced by awe. When Vance and his army arrived at the shore, they saw the incredible pathway, and the last of the Covenant people reaching the other side. Blinded by his rage, Vance did not see a miracle. He saw an opportunity. "Forward," he ordered his drivers. "They cannot escape us now." The entire convoy of armored vehicles charged into the dry passage. They reached the middle of the lake bed, in hot pursuit. At that moment, As the last member of the Covenant community stepped safely onto the far shore, God commanded Elias, "Stretch out your hand over the water, so that the waters may flow back upon them." Elias raised his hand. The colossal walls of water trembled and then collapsed inward with cataclysmic force. A violent, churning maelstrom engulfed Cyrus Vance Sr. and his entire army. The machines were crushed, and the men were drowned in the very waters that had offered salvation to the oppressed. Not a single one survived. As Vance was consumed by the deluge, in his last moments of life, he finally acknowledged the truth. "I believe," he gurgled, "that there is no God except Him, in whom the community of the Covenant believe, and I submit to Him." But a voice from the heavens answered him, "Only now you have disobeyed your whole life and were one of the great corruptors. But today we will preserve your body, so that you may be a sign to those who come after you." On the far shore, the Covenant people watched in stunned silence. But even after witnessing such a profound miracle, some were still so conditioned by Vance's image of invincibility that they could not believe he was truly gone. "Perhaps he survived," they whispered, "and now exists in some other form." To erase any doubt, God caused the current to wash ashore the wreckage of Vance's command vehicle, and there, preserved and unmistakable, was the body of Cyrus Vance Sr., a final, undeniable testament to his mortality and the absolute power of God. Seeing their oppressor lying lifeless on the shore, the people finally understood the totality of their liberation. A great cheer rose up, a song of praise and gratitude for their deliverance. The story of the arrogant tycoon and the parting of the great water would be told for all time, a lesson that no matter how powerful a tyrant may seem, the will of God will always prevail, and a reminder that oppression and disbelief will inevitably face their appointed end. Having crossed the Great Salt Lake and witnessed the demise of their oppressor, the community of the Covenant journeyed onward into the vast wilderness of the American West. Their newfound freedom was disorienting. For generations, their lives had been dictated by the rigid schedules and sterile environment of Ethelberg. Now, the silence of the desert and the weight of their own choices were overwhelming. After some travel, they came across the ruins of an old settlement, where a small group of wasteland scavengers were worshipping a strange idol fashioned from scavenged technology. A complex array of blinking lights and humming servers they believed was a desert deity. Seeing this, a wave of unease and old familiarity passed through the Covenant people. Some of them approached Elias and said, "Elias, make for us a god who will go before us. As for this man who brought us out of Ethelberg, we do not know what has become of him now, that he speaks only of an unseen Lord." Elias was aghast. "Have you so quickly forgotten?" he cried. "After all that God has done for you, freeing you from Vance's tyranny and saving you from his army in the great water, you would now seek a God made of wire and steel. You are a people lost in ignorance." Knowing his people needed structure and divine law, Elias prepared to ascend the great mountain, Mount Seraphim, as God had commanded, to receive the laws that would govern their new society. He appointed his brother Aaron to lead in his absence and told the people, "I will be gone for 40 days. Remain steadfast in your faith until I return." But 40 days was a long time for a people accustomed to constant direction. As the days turned into weeks, their patience wore thin, and their faith wavered. A charismatic and cunning man named Samuel Reed, a former Vance Corp technician who had been among the exiles, saw his opportunity. He had always been resentful of Elias's authority. "Where is this, Elias?" Reed announced to the restless crowd. "He has abandoned us in this wasteland. The unseen God he speaks of is silent, but I can give you a God you can see, a power you can feel." He called upon the people to give him all the valuable metals and electronics they had managed to bring out of Ethelberg. From their salvaged gold circuits, processors, and precious metals, the skillful Reed forged a magnificent idol, a golden bull, its form reminiscent of the bull statue that had stood in Ethelberg's financial district, a symbol of power and wealth they all recognized. Using his technical expertise, he installed a sonic resonator within it, causing the statue to emit a low, powerful hum, like the thrum of a mighty power core. "Behold," Samuel Reed declared, "this is your God, O Covenant people, which brought you out of the land of Ethelberg." The people, lost and desperate for a tangible symbol of authority, fell into a frenzy of celebration. They danced and made offerings to the golden bull, their new god of technology and material wealth. Aaron tried to intervene, begging them to remember the true God, but the crowd turned on him, threatening him with violence. Fearing a complete and bloody schism among his people, Aaron relented, hoping to contain the madness until Elias's return. At the end of 40 days, Elias came down from Mount Seraphim. In his hands, he carried 2 crystalline data slates, upon which God's commandments, the divine protocols for a just and righteous society, were inscribed in characters of pure light. As he neared the camp, he heard the sounds of wild revelry. His heart sank. When he saw the people bowing and dancing before the gleaming golden bull, a holy fury consumed him. In an act of profound grief and anger, he hurled the sacred data slates to the ground, and they shattered into 1,000 pieces at the foot of the mountain. He stormed into the center of the camp and confronted his brother. "Aaron, what have you done?" he roared. "How could you let them fall into such profound corruption?" Aaron, pale and trembling, explained how the people had threatened him, and how he feared the community would tear itself apart. Elias then turned his wrath upon Samuel Reed. "What is this you have done?" Reed, ever the deceiver, offered a strange, mystical excuse. "I simply gathered their metals," he claimed, "and I saw a vision, a trace of the divine messenger's path. I took a handful of that energized dust and cast it into the fire, and out came this bull." Elias knew this was a lie. "Then a curse be upon you," he declared. "From this day forward, you will be an outcast. You will live in isolation, a glitch in our society, unable to connect with anyone. This will be your legacy." He then seized the golden bull, melted it down in a great fire, ground the metal into fine dust, and scattered it into the people's water supply, forcing them to drink the bitter evidence of their sin. He called forth the faithful who had not bowed to the idol, and on God's command, they executed the ringleaders of the rebellion, cleansing the community of its gravest corruption. Filled with sorrow for his people, Elias told them, "You have committed a terrible sin. I will now go back up the mountain and plead with the Lord for your forgiveness." He chose 70 elders from the community to accompany him as witnesses. When they reached a sanctified place on the mountain, God's presence descended as a powerful, crackling energy field. But the elders, their faith still weak, brazenly declared, "Elias, we will not believe until we see God with our own eyes, a direct interface." In response to their arrogance, a blinding flash of divine energy, like a thunderbolt, struck the 70 men, and they fell down as if dead. Elias fell to his knees, crying out to God, "My Lord, will you destroy all of us for the foolishness of a few? Have mercy on your people, whom you have delivered with such great power." In his infinite mercy, God answered Elias's prayer. The elders were revived, humbled, and terrified by the power they had witnessed. God forgave the community, but warned that the consequences of their faithlessness would follow them. Elias was then given a new set of data slates, inscribed with the same divine protocols. With the law restored, God gave them a new command. "Go forward now, and enter the land I have promised you, a fertile valley in the west. It is a land of abundance, but you must claim it from the corrupt and violent people who dwell there." Elias sent 12 scouts, one from each of the community's tribes, to survey this promised valley. They returned 40 days later. 2 of them, Joshua and Caleb, gave a faithful report. "The land is indeed bountiful, and with God's help, we can surely take it." But the other 10 were filled with fear. "We cannot go," they cried, spreading panic through the camp. "The inhabitants are giants, descended from the security enforcers of the old world. Their settlements are like fortresses, protected by advanced military hardware. We were like insects in their sight." The people's spirit broke. They wept and railed against Elias. "It would have been better to perish in Ethelberg or in this desert than to lead our wives and children to be slaughtered." They began to talk of selecting a new leader to take them back to servitude in Ethelberg. In utter exasperation, they turned to Elias and defiantly proclaimed the words that would seal their fate. "Go then, you and your lord, and fight. As for us, we will stay here." Then, the judgment of God was declared. For this profound act of cowardice and lack of faith, the community of the Covenant was sentenced to wander the great American wastelands for 40 years, 1 year for each day the scouts had spent in the valley. Every person of that generation, all those aged 20 and older who had rebelled, would perish in the wilderness. Only their children, a new generation forged in the hardship of the desert and raised under God's law, would be worthy to enter the promised valley. And so their long wandering began. The years passed. The generation that had known slavery in Ethelberg slowly died off. One by one, Aaron passed away and was buried in the mountains. Finally, after 40 years, a new, tougher, and more faithful generation stood ready at the edge of the wastelands, looking toward the borders of the Promised Valley. Elias, now an old man, was led by God to the top of a high peak overlooking the valley. He saw it in all its splendor, the green fields, the flowing rivers, the place of peace and abundance his people would soon call home. But God said to him, "This is the land I promised to them. You have seen it with your own eyes, but you yourself shall not enter." Elias, the great deliverer, the man who spoke with God, died there, alone on the mountain, his mission complete. He was buried in an unmarked grave, his final resting place known only to God. The saga of Elias and the covenant people became a foundational epic, a story of liberation from tyranny, of the struggle between faith and materialism, and of the harsh but necessary journey a people must take to be worthy of true freedom. It served as an eternal reminder that a life of servitude can be escaped in a single night, but the mentality of a slave can take a generation to overcome.